Good morning, everyone. It's Dr. Arlene Diamco, the MultiDimensional MD. And this is the 100th episode of this live stream podcast. So it's a very special one for me. And I want to explain a little bit more about how I started this. I started doing these videos about just before pandemic hit. We didn't know everything was going to go virtual. And I wanted to share more of what I had to say to the world, because my mission is to really bring back the intuitive aspects of health to medicine, to wake up medicine, to access deeper healing, because there is so much more that we can be and we can do, but we're just, it's just scraping the tip of the iceberg. And so in doing these live streams, I wanted to just make things more accessible for people in practical and tangible ways to access that multidimensional healing of the body, mind, and spirit, and to get in touch with your intuition more, because the more you know about yourself, then the more access you have to healing. Because if you really know yourself and you know that you're all love and light, then it's so much easier to feel good and feel joy and feel peace in the world. So today, what I wanted to share was stories from outside the office, and I'm going to go through a couple of flight stories. So is there a doctor on board when you hear that announcement and what happened there? I'm going to go through a mud race where I ran into someone with an ankle injury, just a minor injury, a horse farm with an allergic reaction, and then also how the kids help with healing and how you can too. So, and a little bit more about expanding your perceptual abilities. So this is more story format, story sharing, and just to help you understand more of what I do and how you can also access that in a way for yourself, for your own healing, for your family and your loved ones. So we're going to start with flight number 1. This was when we were on the way, I don't know, to and from California. My whole family was with me. And then you hear on the intercom, is there a doctor on board? Is there anyone medical? And so, my kids are looking at me, and I got up and went up, and there was a man, and he was having difficulty breathing. He looked kind of pale, and he was short of breath. And the thing is, when you're in these emergency situations, you don't really have a chart, you don't have any new patient forms, you don't really know anything about a person. So people are the flight attendants are asking questions while I start checking a person, and slowly a story unfolds. But at the same time, you have to address what's going on at that moment, not having all the information you would usually have. Or, I guess it's more like when you go to the emergency room, but the thing is, in the emergency room, you have all these medications, you have so much access, you have radiology and imaging, you have all this support, and on board a flight, you have nothing. You literally, I have me, they could hand me a stethoscope. They have hardly any medication. I don't even know if they had any Benadryl. Maybe they had some Benadryl, maybe there's some epinephrine, but they really have nothing. So you're working with yourself and seeing what you can do in that situation. So this is where I'm so thankful that I'm a cranial osteopath, because just being me without any supplies, I have so much access. So when I checked out this man, he was having difficulty breathing. His whole breathing mechanism was what we call kind of locked up. It was really stiff. His diaphragm was stiff. His whole chest was stiff. And I just started opening up that flow, getting that rhythm back into the body, releasing the tension in his diaphragm, his whole breathing mechanism, so that he could breathe with more ease. And I started pumping his lymph system, because it just felt like he had so much inflammation in his body. And I've taught all these lymph pumping classes during pandemic, so a lot of you got to benefit from those. And even people that were coughing and having respiratory distress, or with COVID and everything, got to benefit from just feeling that fluid and inflammation and congestion ease up in a way. And these are people, this is not meant to be in isolation. On the flight, I don't really have access to anything else, but when you're, at home, or this is not meant to be, when I tell you these stories, it's not that I'm encouraging you not to seek medical attention. This is supposed to be in addition to. So I'm going to talk about later on ways where you can access like some deeper healing in addition to anything else that you would do in an emergency situation, in addition to calling for help, in addition to going to the emergency room or going to see your doctor. Whatever you would usually do, then you can add to this. So anyway, so this man was having difficulty breathing. So I just helped open up his diaphragm, the tension in his chest and his thorax, get that lymph pumping. And at some point, he started to get color to his face. And so, in asking, when did this start? What happened? What had happened was he'd had this really heavy meal just before his flight. And he doesn't really usually eat like such heavy foods, and so there was a lot of, I think like a pasta dish with a lot of heavy cream that he doesn't usually have. And so what I felt was that he was having like a minor allergic reaction to dairy and the heaviness of the food. And I told him, maybe it would be better to avoid dairy in the future, but to follow up with his physician. And it was so great to just see his family relax into that, and just to get him breathing again, and just to see the color come back to his face, and he could talk with more ease. And of course, my kids, at that flight, they just gave us anything from the menu that you could want. And the kids got as many snacks as they wanted. So they were thrilled to go through that. And I know I'm rambling here, but I just wanted to share with you like these different things that could happen. This next flight number 2, was this was more recent, and I was on a flight back home, and I was actually by myself, not traveling with my family, so I didn't know anyone else on the flight. I was sound asleep, and I was listening to meditation music, but all of a sudden, it's like I got this lightning jolt in me, and so my eyes just opened up, and as soon as I opened my eyes, I heard on the loudspeaker, "Is there anyone medical on board?" And so I got up and went over. And of course, the first thing everyone starts asking me is, "Are you a nurse?" Which I thought was kind of funny. I mean, the stereotype is still there. I was like, "No, I'm a physician." And they said, "Oh, great. So you're the one that's going to come." Because the first person that responded was an EMT, emergency tech. And the next person who responded was a nurse. But you're a physician, so you're the highest level, so you get to come. There's a woman that's unresponsive. So I went back there, and she was in the middle seat with her family around her. And she's just slumped over the seat. Her head's into the seat in front of her, and pale and not responding when we call her name. So she was breathing still, and I checked her pulse, and it was just weak, like not that nice big pulsation, just like a weak pulse. And again, the story is coming in as I'm checking her. I don't know anything about her, don't know what happened beforehand. So it's all unfolding. So while she's still kind of slumped over, I did the same thing. I just put my hands on her and checked her rhythms in her body. And just felt her diaphragm was also locked up. She had all this shock in her body, and that's what tends to be what I feel, is that there's a lot of shock in the body. She had all this tension in her chest. Her adrenals were also just like pretty wiped out. So it was just waking up her rhythms again. So releasing that diaphragm, opening up, getting the flow back in the body. The interesting thing was I was just coming back from this conference, this cranial osteopathic conference. And so I used some of the things that I had just learned there just to get the fluids moving in her. And once there was a bit more flow in her in those rhythms, then she was able to sit back, and her eyes started fluttering, and she started to get more color, and then she started to talk. And so we just got her, from what I felt, she's dehydrated. I was like, we need to get her fluids. And so I was just asking questions along the way. And it turns out, yeah, there was so much reason for her to be dehydrated. So from what I felt, I was getting the confirmation from the story. But after I had felt it, I was like, she needs fluids. So I just started giving her sips of water, or just have her take sips at a time, and then let her rest. And a few minutes later, we'd do sips again. And then as I was feeling things, I was like, her blood pressure feels low. And then after I felt that, she was starting to say, she was like, I have, tendency to have low blood pressure. I was like, we need to get her some salt. So I was like, anything that's salty, pretzels, little salt packets. So we started giving her more salt. And then after doing this for a bit, then that seemed to revive her, and her color came back. And I understand, when you have a loved one and they're unresponsive, I've been through that too. So it can be really scary. So to know that there are things that you can do, and just to get a little bit more color, a little bit more breath, a bit more life in a person, so you get out of that panic, worried state, and then take care of things later on. So yeah, she had a lot of reason to be dehydrated and had some GI illness, so had lost a lot of fluids. And so we pieced the story together afterwards, and then it started to make a lot of sense. And then we started to land, and so they rushed me back to my seat. And that time, instead of getting snacks, they gave me a voucher. So that was really nice, a flight voucher. And in these emergency situations, unfortunately, like, there's a Good Samaritan law comes in effect. They had me sign something. It was just a waiver that, because you are there to help, and they had nothing else. I'm sure the airline's really thankful anytime they don't have to land, that you're able to help in some way. So the next story I want to tell you is from a mudder race. So it's one of those races, you're racing, going through the mud. And I ran into this woman who had stumbled and had a little bit of an ankle injury. And maybe I should back up some and to tell you a little bit more about what I do. So as a cranial osteopath, I'll feel for the alignment of the bones, but also feel for tension in the fascia and the dura that holds everything in place. I'll feel for the movement of the fluids, so the arteries that bring nutrients, the veins that remove toxins, the lymph flow that drains inflammation, and that cerebral spinal fluid flow so the nerves can communicate well. And I'll also feel for the organs and how they're integrated, so they need to be in tune and in rhythm to feel balanced and whole. So I'll check for all of these things. So it's really great to have all this access when you have nothing, you have no tools, you have no medications, you only have you. And then as soon as you get into a place where you do have like more tools and medications and more staff and everything, that's great. But sometimes you don't have that, and you just have you. So I stumbled into this woman, and she had stumbled, and she had stopped on the side because her ankle was hurting her. So I just a quick check to make sure she hadn't broken anything, or there was no like serious sprain. It was more of a minor sprain. And so the great thing is that I could feel that tension or the tweaks in the tissues. And so what I felt was just that her tissues and that fascia dura layer had just been kind of torqued a bit. And so that's why she was in pain, because it was like left in this kind of like twisted position. And so just restoring that natural balance and that more neutral position, and getting the flow, the fluids to her ankle. And then she started to feel better, so she could at least like walk or to the finish line if she couldn't, because she had stopped for a while. And again, this just takes moments to do. It doesn't always happen like this, but there's so much you can do even in a moment. And this happened again, like when I was at a horse farm. I had a family member there who was probably allergic to whatever was out, the dust, the pollen, the horses, everything. And she was starting to feel like scratchy, itchy in her throat, and a little bit of swelling. Not totally like anaphylactic, but she was starting to feel that itchiness and some wheeziness in her breath. And so I had learned to do some quantum healing with Richard Bartlett. And so I implemented that with some of the cranial osteopathic techniques that I knew, just to, again, calm down that nervous system, rebalance the immune system. And within moments, her breathing started to improve and she was able to relax. And usually in these situations, people are really in a panic. And so that's another thing to address is just to calm the nervous system because they're so much in shock and things start to like spiral. So if I can reset the nervous system and they can relax a bit more and get more ease to their breath, then their bodies can just take over in this more relaxed state and return to a more balanced state. So that is also really neat. And so that takes me to the most important thing is how kids help with healing, how you can too. And my kids along the way through the years, especially when they're little, they're less shy about talking about these things. And so one of my kids, when she was in second grade, she said to me, Mommy, what you can do, I can do too. And so my eyebrows kind of raised like, oh, really? Thinking like, oh, it took me years to learn to do this. And I had to study and go to medical school and do all this training afterwards. She's like, yeah, what you can do, I can do too. So I asked her, what do you mean? She's like, well, somebody fell at the playground. And she said, I put my hands on because their knee hurt. And she said, I pulled out the hurt. And then I didn't want to just throw it anywhere because I didn't want anyone else to hurt. So I threw it towards the ground because I knew the ground wouldn't hurt. And I thought that was so amazing because she was basically grounding this hurt energy. And she knew the ground wouldn't hurt. The ground was big enough that it could absorb it and ground it so that it could process. And I didn't teach her how to do that. She just innately knew to do that. And so I was like, wow, she does know how to do what I do. Maybe I describe it a little bit differently, but in the essence of it is all there. And then another two of my girls, when I wasn't feeling well, I think I had a belly ache or something, they said, Mommy, we're going to help you. And so they put their hands on, and I think the little one, she was pretty little, maybe 3 or so. Then her older sister is like, oh, we'll just put our hands on and send love to Mommy. And they did that. And you could just feel all this warmth and all this like loving energy, just like soothing my body. And the little one said, well, how much do we send her? And her older sister laughed and said, just keep going until you feel like it feels better. So this is what you can do in any situation, is to send yourself love, to send your loved ones love, whoever you're trying to help. It helps to start with you first so that you can be in a position where you feel more balanced, so you can access more of that infinite well of love within you. So if all you did was put your hands on, you could put them on your heart or anywhere that you need to in your body, and to breathe that in and to just drop into your heart center and keep your breath moving, and to know that there's this infinite well of love that you can send to yourself and you can send to anyone. And that's that kind of sums it all up in terms of what I'm doing in any kind of treatment. And so I know that anyone can access this kind of healing. And again, I'm not saying don't do this, don't go to the doctor, don't follow the instructions of what your physician or a healthcare practitioner is telling you. This is in addition to, this is all worlds. And there are so many ways that you can access healing, but at the same time, all healing is one, because all healing comes from this love that you want to share with somebody else, that you want to help them. You have this desire to help somebody. You have this desire to help yourself. So all healing comes from love. But the way you take steps and whatever actions you take to do that can vary. So one person like me, I'm a cranial osteopath, might access it in that way and do hands-on healing. A physician in the emergency room might have access to, radiology and imaging and medications, because sometimes you need to use epinephrine and albuterol and get someone breathing really quickly, because you don't have time to see if what you do with just placing your hands on and is that going to be enough when you have really just seconds to do something. So um, to access all worlds, and this is an integrative approach, and to remember that you're not alone and you can always ask for help. And that's one of the first things to do when you're in an emergency situation, is to ask for help and see if there's somebody that knows how to do something that maybe you don't know how to do. And that's what they did on the plane, and that's what you can do anytime. And even if you're a physician, physicians know how to do certain things. I know how to do certain things. I don't know how to do surgery. I don't know how to do what my mom did. She's an anesthesiologist. So I don't know how to do those things, and those things are also life-saving. So to appreciate everyone and their gifts and their talents, and to never hesitate to ask for help, whether it means help from another person, higher help from your guides, from your angels, whatever you believe in, from the oneness, the divine. And this is how we access multidimensional healing. So thank you for being here with me today and letting me share these things. I know I was riffing it a bit and just kind of sharing these stories off the cuff, but there are so many more stories to share. I have stories from the wildfires in California, from the hurricanes, with a medical school had to evacuate, with the tension and trauma release work. I have endless stories. So if there's anything in particular that you would like to hear about, then please let me know. And I would love to share more. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. You can find me on Instagram at All Worlds Health, on Facebook at All Worlds Health and Pediatrics. On my website, I send out an e-love letter every week on Wednesday, and you can sign up there at allworldshealth.com. So thank you so much for joining me. It's Dr. Arlene Diamco, the MultiDimensional MD, and this is the 100th episode of this live stream. So lots of love to all of you. I will see you next week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. EST.